Senate Republicans are worried about a blue wave sweeping through swing states and now even red states, such as Texas and Georgia. Here's how some Senate Republicans are handling that rising tide.
I was the first Republican to speak out against repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
I am proud to be the only U.S. Senator with a 100% voting record with President Trump.
President Trump complicating your race?
No, I would say I'm running my own race.
Tolu, inside the GOP, there's a lot of unease, but very different approaches to the challenges facing all of them. How is the White House going to play it in the final few days in terms of where they go and what the president says?
Yeah, it seems the White House is really focused squarely on President Trump's reelection. Now, they would love it if the side benefit to that is that all these Senate Republicans also get elected, but they are really focusing on the electoral map, trying to make sure President Trump gets to 270. They aren't listening to any Senate Republicans that want to keep him away or keep him at arm's length. They're going where President Trump needs to go to try to win. Now, some of these Senate Republicans do want to keep the president at arm's length. People like Susan Collins are not embracing the president. They are, trying to show their distance from him as they fight for their political survival. But a lot of these Senate Republicans need President Trump's voters. People like Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. He needs President Trump's voters to see him as an ally of the president, as someone who's on the president's team as he faces a surprising competitive race in South Carolina against Jamie Harrison. He realizes that if President Trump supporters vote for President Trump and leave his race blank, or vote for a third-party candidate, or even cross parties to vote for his opponent because maybe they don't think he's a strong enough supporter of President Trump, he could lose as a result. So even as some of these Republicans are trying to put some distance between themselves and the president because they realize that his approval ratings are pretty low, he's not doing very well with the suburban and moderate voters that they need to win in their specific states, they realize that they do need the president's base to come out in high numbers. So you're not going to see as much separation as you might with a president who is struggling so much in the polls.
Senator Collins is fascinating. Our friend Jonathan Martin at the New York Times posted a story today saying Senator Collins once considered even running as an independent in 2020 to try to make sure she could win up there in Maine. But Asma, as we look at this map, we're seeing the Biden campaign, which is flush with cash, starting to look at Georgia. Texas, Senator Cornyn's on edge there, too. He's skittish about his reelection. How realistic is it to have this blue wave become a blue tsunami that goes across places like Georgia, maybe even Mississippi, Alabama? Democrats were talking about that today as well.
Sure. I mean, Bob, I think to me that's perhaps one of the most interesting questions this cycle, but it's also the question that I think when you pose it to Democratic strategists, quite candidly, they're very anxious about even discussing that question given the results of what happened in 2016, right? There was a point during the 2016 cycle where Hillary Clinton's campaign was ambitiously talking about Arizona. That was, I believe, actually the same day that the Comey letter came out, and we all know that the race dramatically shifted shortly after that. So I do think that there is this anxiety, you could argue maybe it's rooted in reality or not, among some Democrats about being overly optimistic about the map. That being said, you look at ad spending, and I believe the Biden campaign, according to Ad Analytics, is currently, advertising locally in about 19 states. I mean, that's a really ambitious map, and certainly they have the money to do that. Kamala Harris herself was campaigning today in Georgia, and we all know that where, both the candidate and his running mate go, that expresses a certain level of intensity of what they feel this state means. And to me, I was struck by the fact that they chose to send her today to Georgia. One thing, though, I will say is I'm still myself a little skeptical about this idea that, unless, say, take a state like Georgia, unless that state actually goes at the top of the ticket or Joe Biden or Donald Trump, I just don't see the Senate flipping. I mean, we're in a situation where research has shown people don't split their tickets as much as they used to, right? There's not a lot of nuance there. And so I'm really skeptical of the sense that we're going to see the president win a state, say like Texas, but we're going to see someone like John Cornyn lose this seat.
Susan, you're writing a biography of Speaker Pelosi. She was attacked by President Trump at the debate, who said maybe Republicans could even gain the House majority back, and he was referencing this ongoing stalled stimulus negotiation. Could the lack of a stimulus hurt President Trump and House Democrats? How do you see that?
Well, some House Democrats, especially from moderate districts, have been very concerned about the failure to get together on even a kind of a half a loaf deal to get some more relief out there for the costs across the country of the pandemic. But you know, the politics of that is complicated, and I think there was also a calculation by some Democrats that giving half a loaf, making a deal for aid, was likely to help President Trump, to give him talking points and bragging rights about delivering more aid to people who need it. So I think you have seen those talks get slow walked by Nancy Pelosi. I think she wants to have a bill passed. Maybe she doesn't want to have a bill passed just for, just quite yet. Maybe we'll see that happen in the lame duck session. That now seems more likely.
Tolu, Judge Amy Coney Barrett is headed to a likely confirmation on the Senate floor next week. Is this going to be a galvanizing event for Republicans, or has it actually faded into the background a bit?
Surprisingly, the historic addition of a new Supreme Court justice in the final days before an election is now sort of a footnote. It's not even something that is being really talked about by Democrats or Republicans, even though it's a historic move and a move that breaks with a lot of precedent. And it does galvanize a lot of Democrats who are saying, for this reason, I'm going to turn out and show my dissatisfaction with the Republicans moving forward to fill this seat in the final days of the election, even though they held open a seat when President Obama made his nomination more than 9 months before the 2016 election. So there is a lot of question about whether or not this will impact the race when it comes to turnout on the Republican side. It does remind a large number of Republicans why they voted for President Trump, even though they don't like his personality, they don't like the way he handles himself in office. They do like a lot of his policies. They do like the fact that he appoints conservative justices. They do like the fact that he was willing to push through this justice and make sure that he leaned on Republicans to make sure that this choice was added before the election and not allow this to be held over until after.
So we have a few minutes left here. I'll call this kind of a lightning round. Asma, when you talk to the Biden campaign, and they know all these attacks on Hunter Biden are coming, they were coming at the debate as well, is he going to continue to hold back, to be restrained in response?
My sense is they don't take that as a serious allegation. They have been discussing and telling us that, this is part of a disinformation, misinformation campaign. And given what we saw happen during the 2016 election, I would say they're very hesitant to engage in that topic.
Susan Page, the early voting numbers are huge. But how do you interpret all of that information? Is it actually a boon for the Democrats, or is it hard to say?
Yeah, well, their votes in the bank, so that's a boon for Democrats, right? What we don't know yet is whether it's cannibalizing voters who would ordinarily just go on Election Day, or whether you're getting new voters in. There are some signs that these extraordinary numbers do reflect new voters. It certainly reflects Democratic enthusiasm about this election.
Tolu, where is Vice President Pence going to be headed in the final few days of this campaign? What's his role?
He's going to be doing something similar to what President Trump is doing, which is traveling multiple rallies a day, going to a number of these swing states, trying to convince Republican voters that even if you don't like the president's personality, look at what we've done. He's been much more on message than President Trump. He does not get distracted. He does not go down all of these rabbit holes of scandal. So I do expect him to be delivering a very clear and direct message about the conservative point of view that he and President Trump have been putting forward over the past 4 years, and trying to convince moderate voters, trying to convince Republican voters who may be on the fence to stick with the Trump-Pence ticket and not go for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So I do expect him to be a much more disciplined campaigner than President Trump, and also to be quite as eager and active as President Trump on the campaign trail.
Asma, you were in Michigan. So many Senate Republicans are nervous, but are Democrats nervous about Senator Peters up there?
I will say, Democrats, to me in Michigan, I came back actually and told my editor this, I feel like Michigan, when you speak to Democrats, is one of the most optimistic states for them. And I say that for a multitude of reasons. I mean, one is, if you look in 2018, Democrats did phenomenally well up and down when you look at the gubernatorial race, Senate seats, they are very optimistic. And, we hear the president routinely calling out to different demographic groups like suburban women. Suburban women were key in Michigan. They remain remain a key demographic group. And by and large, from the conversations I've been having, they seem to be rather disillusioned with President Trump's handling of a variety of issues.
Final question, real quick, Susan. Does Speaker Pelosi and President Trump cut a deal or not before the election?
I think it's hard to do that before the election, but I think it is much more likely to have one after the election in the lame duck.